So what I mean by non-duality. Yeah, the reason that I like to do that is because that's the most important part of the teaching, is me talking about non-duality. Well, actually, it's not the most important part. The most important part is the energetic resonance with it. But the talking about the non-duality, I feel, is like a really important part of it. And so easily, if I don't explain that at the beginning of the talks, it can get a bit diluted. So I just would like to explain what I mean by non-duality. When I speak to you, I'm going to use very personal terms of I think, my view. And that might be confusing if you're used to non-duality or Ramana Maharshi or some teachers that say, this is God speaking, this is oneness teaching you non-duality. And that is true. But the reason that I don't say it like that is because it can give a lot of wrong impressions. And non-duality has just got such a bad rep for all this guru abuse stuff that happens. So I feel like as a non-duality teacher, you have to bring it down to make it clear that it's your opinion and your way of teaching. Because even though this is oneness speaking, it's oneness creating everywhere, but it's coming through the filter of Lisa Cairns here in this talk. So it's not like it is consciousness expressing, but it's expressed through Lisa's point of view. So I don't start teaching Japanese non-duality in Japanese because this body doesn't know Japanese. So it will come through the conditioned body. So I think it's important to stay to that, because it's important not to grandiose, I don't know if that's a word, a teacher, to not put them up on a pedestal and make out that everything they say is God speaking, because even if it's true, it's just got the potential for misrepresentation and abuse to be had, like for people to use that in a negative way. So I feel like it's good that non-duality speakers start saying it in me, I, my opinion, because that's also true in a way. Yeah. So non-duality to me from this perspective, in this moment, which might be different from 10 videos ago. So in the end, non-duality is speaking about this moment. It's speaking about the oneness of this moment, the not two-ness of this moment. So this moment isn't divided in any way. This moment is like a picture hanging on the wall. It's all encompassing of everything. And so when you look at a picture, in order to know the ducks from the sky, there is outline to their form and different color variations. So in the picture on the wall, it's done by color variation to determine outline. And that's actually, you could say that's the same here. Like we all have different color. Like if we painted ourselves all exactly the same white, even if we were moving, it kind of looked like we're the same thing. We kind of know each other through heat or through touch, but not through sight. Maybe there'll be some form of sight to it, but it's more interactive. Like this isn't like a still picture. And because it's interactive, and because we have a narrative that says I am somebody interacting with this world, it gives the appearance, or makes it seem like the objects are separate. So I am separate from the chair, from the air, from the wall, from the window. But that, to me, is illusory. That's not the truth. That's not the way things are. To me, the truth is there is one moment that's happening, and there can't be anything removed from this moment in order for it to be happening. It's like a perfectly complete picture that's dependent on everything. So my voice, the sound of my voice, cannot be removed from all the other things that are happening. So from the sound of the car that's driving past outside, or the birds singing, or it's like a hum. Oh, the computer's humming, but there's also like a hum in the room. And also my form can't be. I can't be extracted out of this picture. But that's like a far jump for the mind to accept, because the mind is always used to the narrative that I'm separate from my environment and I'm interacting with my environment. So traditional, well, not traditional, but a lot of non-duality expresses it in the form of consciousness. And I love speaking about consciousness. You get different variants. You get some people that say all there is nothing and everything, and consciousness is illusory too, which I kind of also don't agree with, but I can't really explain that. Like, consciousness doesn't exist as a thing. But consciousness is a great way to explain this, because otherwise it just sounds so abstract. Like to the mind, could you say, like this is not two-ness, or that this moment is one movement of everything? It's too far out there. It doesn't, like, that makes no sense. So in consciousness teaching, you can point to that there is something experiencing this that isn't separate from everything, and that everything is that. And then that helps see or know the oneness of everything. Because when that's really recognized, and when there's an energetic shift, the consciousness in a way disappears, even though it's there, because there is obviously the conscious recognition of this. It also is like not a position, not located, so it also doesn't exist. I know that's really confusing. That's a bit too far. So we just come back to the simplicity of the consciousness teaching. So right now, there is a watching happening. This pure, brilliant, still watching. And it's not separate from everything. There is nothing outside of this consciousness. So it's not like consciousness stops here. So you're looking at me and consciousness stops here and then I appear. It's all appearing in consciousness. Like, how would you know me if I was outside of that one consciousness? And the mind says the consciousness belongs to me, and I am as a separate entity conscious. What the teachings suggest is that consciousness is not inside the brain, but it's actually inherent in everything, which is mind-blowing. So there's one consciousness that's inherent in everything. And science actually is beginning to question this to an extent, and beginning to think that consciousness might not be inside the brain. Not personal awareness, but consciousness, which is really spectacular. So the consciousness is actually appearing in the things. So everything is conscious, not a somebody inside the body. But this is actually your direct experience. Your direct experience is that consciousness isn't located somewhere. There is a feeling of being contracted inside the body. But if you just notice that as a feeling, there is this feeling of my body ends here and I am as a story and the thinker am inside this bit of my body. The consciousness is actually in everything. Like, where does consciousness end? When it's separated out from personal awareness, that pure consciousness that's not a thing, that's not the name, not an identity, not a story, not something you want or you don't want. It's not got colour, it's not anything, it's simply watching. So when it's separated out from you, where is this consciousness but everywhere? And it's like really expanded, like your essence is expanded. And to me, waking up is this energetic shift back to that. It's not the getting rid of a character. So there is a Lisa character here, but it's this energy waking up. So your essence feels very big and very expanded and not two. Your deep essence, but your character feels separate. It's appropriate to say and feel that your character is separate. So I as Lisa have pain. I as Lisa like this drink. I as Lisa have a dog and responsibilities. But there's another side to me that's not Lisa, that's not personal, that's not human. And this side is forgotten. And it's this waking up that's that shifts a lot in the experience of the person and the experience. And it's an energetic shift to that consciousness no longer feeling like it's bound inside the body. Ultimately, it never was bound inside the body, but it feels like it's bound inside the body with the person. So it feels like there is somebody that is bound inside this body, and that consciousness belongs to it. And there is a releasing of that. I actually don't know what that release is, like how that works physiologically, if it is a physiological thing, or what does happen is a seeking stops. And you could say that it's like you afterwards, there is no longer a looking for your sense of freedom inside the person, because when the person's identified with consciousness, there's a part of yourself that's being lost, like you've lost your ground, your foundation. So that person always feels the sense of dissatisfaction and nervousness and like it's not quite home. So that disappears, this seeking energy. And that seeking energy might also be what kind of like keeps that feeling of tightness. I don't know, but there's something that happens. Maybe there's something that breaks in the brain, but I don't know. Scientists haven't discovered yet, and there's so many different theories out there as to what's happened. All I can talk about is experientially, something shifts. What happened in the life of Lisa prior was a lot of investigation into non-duality, meditation, spiritual practices. I lived with a teacher who kept pointing out this is illusion, this is illusion. Like gave up my whole entire life for this subject, like complete shift in my life, in my perspective, and yeah, like this. And that's what a lot of teachers report back too, that happened to them. But there's also teachers that report back different things. From the absolute perspective, that's all illusory. But from the human perspective, it's relevant. So from the absolute, there is no time, there is no person, there is no somebody awakening, there is simply what's happening, and that's free. And from that perspective, that all seems kind of like a crazy, well, no, not crazy dream, but it just seems very irrelevant. not that that perspective can't have a feeling of being irrelevant, but it kind of, it's just your absolute nature is perfectly content in itself, and it just knows everything, as in feels content in everything and doesn't have any questions. And these kind of stories just float through it like everything else. So it's just is irrelevant from that perspective. What I find happens to me during the day is there's times when there is more being nothing and then more being Lisa. So there's sometimes more character involvement, and then sometimes there's more involvement with that absolute. Remember, my words are just words, and everybody else's description might be completely different of it. And yeah, and so don't hold on to anything I'm saying. Like Tony Parsons used to say, if you leave holding on to anything I say, then you're completely missing what's being said. And when there's less person and more of the absolute, then there's a feeling of immense love and expandedness, and it's not so easy to function on the human level. And then there's more character that feels like it goes more gently into the background. And my character doesn't mind. Like the being more character or less character there, it's just as it is. Yeah. Speaking about your experience is always difficult because it just creates so many different ideas. So that's what non-duality currently in this moment is here. And it saved my life. It's the most beautiful thing that I've ever heard, and I'm absolutely in love with it. But now let's get to the bittersweetness of speaking about it. So I think my intention of speaking about it, is not to give a intellectual, accurate depiction of everything, even though it's nice when that happens. My intention of speaking about it is to awaken something. I think that when I'm speaking about this subject, there can be a resonance with something that's beyond the personal. And then also there is intellectual clarity that can happen, which I think is great. But that's what I feel like I do in these live streams and on retreats. Like that, I would say, is the most important thing. The rest of the stuff is kind of nice information, and it can change things and shift things, and there can be revelations on the human level. But the most important thing is this resonance. However, I know that non-duality can be taken in so many different ways. So there will most probably be lots of people in the audience that kind of intuitively sense that and resonate with what's being said, and kind of use these talks like a meditation. And then there will be people in the audience that are seeking to have some intellectual clarity and looking for something to do and looking for a better experience in their life. And then there'll be some people that are like really, really, really suffering, and they're very desperate and they're very vulnerable. So and then there's like loads in between. These are just like 3 big categories that I've suggested. And non-duality is not always appropriate. Like if you're not resonating, then I don't know how appropriate these teachings are for you, but I can't look into the internet and look into everyone's brain and see what's appropriate or not. Like, if these teachings are taken as a religion or taken as a dogma or taken as a way of living, then I don't think that's going to be very psychologically healthy for you. Like, so this isn't prescribing a way of viewing the world or a way of living. It's meant to question and unpick what you know so that something else can be presented, but it's not meant as a new way of seeing things. So if you walk around thinking that you're nobody, I think that this is really destructive, but I can't stop that happening. I can't. If you think that you have no doership, then I don't think that's the healthiest thing to do. I think that everybody's different, and some people need energetic work, psychological work not prior to this, but even maybe while listening to this, like yoga, physical work. Like, people can have immense traumas in their life, and this isn't a substitute for sorting out traumas or sorting out very difficult situations of marriages or life scenarios or having like immense stress. There is so much out there on offer for how to reduce stress. I do think that this is ultimate freedom, and maybe if we were around each other all the time, then there could be a going into more of these human parts, but this is only a couple of hours talk once a week or whatever I do. And I see a lot of people get into non-duality and then giving up healthy things to make your life better, because they think that that's seeking, or they think that that means that there's somebody there, or they think that's wrong. And I really don't promote that. Like, as myself, a human Lisa, I always like try to go towards more expanded and healthy situations. Like, I'm not living like partying or drinking alcohol till like 2 or 3 in the morning, or fighting all the time with my partner, or screaming and shouting at people and being in rages and eating really unhealthily. And like from all the things that I've learned through spirituality through all the years, like, I would say that Lisa's character is quite wise. And I do that even after this shift. Like, I see the wisdom in doing these things. And I just find it sad that people come into this thinking, okay, I've just got to focus on there being no self and give up everything else and don't try in everything else. And for some people this is so super destructive, because they're coming at it from a mind angle, and then there's never really an awakening, and then in that, their whole life gets worse and worse and worse. And then I see lots of videos now on YouTube about the dangerousness of non-duality and the badness of non-duality and the badness of Neo-Advaita teachers, and I can kind of understand what they're saying, even though I'm one of those teachers, because it's taken in the wrong way. And in a way that's perfect, that couldn't have been any other way. Like, life can only be the way it is. But it's also sad on the human level to see, and it's sad that that's one effect of non-duality, that that's the bittersweetness. So in my talks, I just keep trying to remind people to look after the human, look after the psychology, while exploring this subject. And if you find that this subject is very mental for you, and you're trying to go to all these teachers to intellectually understand it, that's okay to an extent. But if there's no resonance as well, it might be that non-duality isn't the right spiritual path for you, and there's so many others. If you go to the Indian traditions, you might find it's devotion or yoga or service. Yeah. I always recommend settling down the person. It's not like F the person and just going for the stillness. So there's two different practices. Like the main practice in non-duality is putting the attention either on the I am or the consciousness. And that kind of, to me, is similar to the practice of Buddhism. It's like putting the attention on this moment. I think that's a healthy thing to do, but I think you also need to clean the cage, because if there is lots of seeking and emotions and things that you're running away from, you're never going to be able to do this. It's going to be torturous. So cleaning up the cage, understanding like why the mind is running, like what triggered that. Yeah, it's the seeking, but was it also difficulty in expressing yourself, or difficulty in your love life? Like, what is that? Yeah. And so these talks aren't like you're just going to listen to non-duality and you're just going to have a big pop and it's all going to be over. That's like daydream. You know, I went through, prior to listening to non-duality, you know, I started in therapy, I went to Buddhism, I practiced meditation, I did energetic work, I did qigong, yoga, although I wasn't so keen on that, and I did like loads of massage and acupuncture and acupressure, and lots of physical work, lots of emotional release, like understanding my emotions, like tracing back the thoughts to the emotion, where I find it in the body, like years of doing that. And then I did it super intensely with a teacher who didn't let me run off into many directions before. It's like, that's mind. Yeah. This dream of an Eckhart Tolle story, I suppose that can happen, but I think that's very rare. From my experience, I've very, very rarely seen people awaken like that. Most of the time, it comes from settling down the person, then there's a pop. And also Eckhart Tolle did do lots of work for that. I think he did do spiritual work and therapy and all those different things. I don't know though. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm also into teachings like law of attraction. Like, I know I've spoken about that before, like I was prior as well, like thinking positively, all these different things. Like I was listening of things that I was into. I come across a lot of very heady people and people that come from the intellect, and if you feel like you're resonating to the talk, like keep carrying on listening and you can listen to it, but I wouldn't let it become your new way of living. Like I would get into going into the feelings, investigating the feelings where you feel them in the body, rather than like trying to repeat a story of non-duality. And then when you feel balanced, like keep bringing your attention back to the present moment. So say if you're having a fight with your partner and your mind is thinking what an asshole he is, so it's going off like, he's an asshole, and what the mind would like to do is erase it with non-duality. So it's like, yes, but there is no doer, who are you getting angry with? That's an interesting contemplation once or twice, but if this is regularly happening, that is spiritual bypassing. So what you're wanting to do in that situation is you either want to put your attention back in the present moment and let it go, like letting the thoughts go. We're not talking about how to resolve the situation. If you're having problems in relationships, then you can go onto my website and there's lots of therapists that you can go and speak to who can help you in relationships and how to relate better. That's a whole technique. There's a therapist called Kirk Honda who just looks at couples relationships. So that's like a way of being able to express yourself, but that's not what I'm a teacher of. But you can go and look up how to express better my wants and needs and how to have better relationships. There's so many different ways. Non-violent communication is really beautiful. So I'm not saying don't address the difficulties in the communication that you're having. There's so many things that you can do, and you can begin to have really balanced, beautiful, trusting relationships if you do this. But you want to, so if your mind just keeps repeating like what an asshole they are, or a colleague at work, if it's not too strong, then it's like letting it go. It's like the mind wants to go out into these thoughts and then bringing it back to this moment. But if you find that the thoughts are too strong, that it keeps pulling you in it, then you want to investigate the feeling, because it will be attached to other feelings. So say if your partner refuses to do the washing up when they say they're going to do the washing up, or refuses to clean and keeps leaving the house in a mess. I mean, this is a very typical argument. So you can go and look in how to communicate that to your partner appropriately. And you can go and look that up on the internet. You can look on my reference page. There's loads of pages about better relationships. That's a whole technique about being able to express it to him or her. And then once you've tried the putting in the moment, then you want to go into what feelings you're having. So you want to connect it to the body first. So where do I feel that in the body? And then you want to also connect it to a previous story. So it's elevated more than likely because it's connected to a younger part in you from the past. So say if you it maybe could just be connected to, as a child, you didn't feel listened to by your parents, and so you're feeling not listened to. So you first of all connect it, okay, so it's in my heart, I feel like unseen and unlistened to. And you want to connect it to the past. So is the past story in that? So you feel the feeling. Is there a past story in that? And then you look and find, okay, it reminds me of when I wasn't listened to as a child. And then allow that in. You can allow the child to speak, like they don't love me, they don't see me. You can let the emotions speak, like nobody loves me, he doesn't see me. You can jump up and down and express it in the privacy, not so they hear it, like act it out a little bit. You can also work with someone one-on-one to explore this feeling. And these are two great practices to do. And this is what I feel like is a great way to live your life. But there's lots of other ways, like lots of other therapies, is to connect it to the body, connect it to the past, connect that childlike voice that's coming out of you, and then also putting your attention back in the present moment. So you're having the emotional release, but you're also practicing this presence. And that's what should be happening, rather than in your mind just telling yourself a non-dual story. There is nobody, there's nobody here, da 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 da. That is spiritual, what I will call spiritual bypassing. So I still have these feelings. So yesterday I met somebody, and sometimes my personality is a little weird. I've always been told that I'm a little bit weird. Maybe it doesn't come along. Yeah, I think it comes out on YouTube. Yeah, I think everyone's aware that Lisa's a little bizarre. I don't mean like psychotically losing track of reality. I mean like I'm just a little creative, and the way I speak and see things, and my humor. And so yesterday when I was speaking with someone, a good friend, I had this sense of feeling very like my weirdness was a bit too weird. And after the conversation, I expressed that to my friend, and I didn't actually go so deep into it because it wasn't such a problem. But if I went really deep into it, it's like in childhood being told not to be weird. Like, you know, you've got to act like a girl. You've got to act like this girl that has a bow in her hair and is all sweet and puppy dogs and candy floss. There I am, like, yeah, running and touching and doing all the things that girls don't do. You know, and so that still occurs in the Lisa personality, and I feel like that will occur infinitely. There won't be this moment where the human side disappears. What happened when I had that awakening was that this became less. So it's like the emotions became less intense and more intense because you feel them, so there's not this denial of them. So it's like when I have a feeling, it's like in a way the whole world experiences the feeling. It's like huge, but it became less intense, as in they're not seen as needing resolution. I don't need something from the world to make me happy, like, or free. I might need things, as in need food, need love in that way, but I don't need it to make me happy, to give me freedom. And most people think that when they get awakened, that side's going to go, not because it's a rational, logical idea. Like, so there'll be people projecting onto me, oh, she's not enlightened, she doesn't know what she's talking about because she should always be zen and have no emotion. But the reason that gets projected on, I would suspect, is because there is part of you that wants to deny yourself, so your emotions, which goes back to your childhood. Yeah, so you want to come back to being really human and really vulnerable. It's not stepping out of the human, it's becoming really human. And it's almost like in your humanity, you disappear. So it's like in a situation, you know, like that situation, it was so sweet when I expressed that to my friend, and then my friend said they felt vulnerable in that situation because they wanted me to like them. And it was just so sweet. And I did want them to like me, but it was also something else as well, like with my neurodiversity. And that's like really beautiful. It's like really like it's just total vulnerability and openness. And it's not seen as like a negative thing. We all have these vulnerabilities. So it's not using non-duality to escape. And as you become more and more simple, then the mind won't go off into all these deluded thoughts. You know, prior to non-duality and getting into this, I could see that thoughts would go into maybe putting the other person down, or I did wrong, or feeling like da-da-da, and going into like lots of stories about it. Yeah. So this is becoming more human. I can see all these like intellectuals that are imagining like waking up and having no emotion ever again, and I am not happy with her. She is fake. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's a bimbo. She shouldn't be on the YouTube. Yeah. And that's okay to feel like that. I think I would have felt like that before as well. I think I had a big desire to not have feelings, because if I could not have feelings, then I could be a perfect person to people. And what I wanted to be, or what I felt like I was trained to be, was to accept like unacceptable things in relationships. You know, our family had a lot of trauma, and I was asked by a lot of adults to not complain and to not have any wants or needs. So I felt like if I could get enlightened, I'd have no wants and needs. I would have no emotions, and then I could be finally what these adults wanted me to be: nothing. And that's not what this is. It's the opposite. There is this nothingness, but this nothingness is non-human. On the human level, it's being really human. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so let's see if there's any commies first. The young person's glasses. The lassies. Hey, Thomas. Yes, Peter wants to. Best talk ever. Oh, that's sweet. I do. Best talk ever, but I do feel that way very often. Oh, you're so sweet, Isabel. I suspect what's happening because I know that you really resonate, you know, from that, like you have that devotion side to you that really resonates, is that when I'm doing these live talks sometimes is like it really gets strong, that resonance, and then it feels like the best talk ever, because that's kind of like that absolute side, like the way it manifests into the human life is like joy, and not all the time, but it's like this underlying sense of like woohoo. I used to always say, and I don't say it so much now, but I am, like this is, yeah, so beautiful.